Will Californians replace the racially discriminatory cash bail system with something worse? I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, resident of California that you are, you may know that Proposition
The answer is
25
yes.
is, I hate to rub it in, is on the ballot for the November 3rd election, or as I call it, the final election day on November 3rd. And it would replace the cash bail system largely with a risk assessment tool that is basically an algorithm. And I'll try to use the language in the article that I read. It's an NBC News article. It is an algorithm which uses data about a person's background and criminal history to assign a risk score. And oddly enough, Bill, for years, civil rights activists and people who were concerned about justice reform have been pushing to get rid of the cash bail system because it discriminates, they say, against people who don't have a lot of money, and disproportionately those people tend to be black. But they're starting to see that these algorithms, in some ways, could possibly be worse and actually heighten the racial discrimination. I wouldn't ask you how you're going to vote on Proposition 25, but how are you going to vote on Proposition 25?
I'm going to stay with the cash bail system. To me, my first instinct when I heard this was, okay, so we're going to go to an algorithm that's going to assess people, and we'll make that the law. And then the next thing we'll do, next election cycle in 2 years, is we'll say that that algorithm is racist. And since we've abolished cash bail, then we really should just abolish bail completely. If you really honestly want to know what I think the objective is, having lived here as long as I do believe that is the objective now, is to eliminate the idea of bail and simply turn everyone free on their own recognizance. And this is from a government that I've just watched let prisoners out of jail because of the COVID so-called plandemic.
But actually, Bill, what you're suggesting is not out of the question. In fact, in New York, a law recently went into effect this year, I believe, that eliminates pretrial detention and cash bail in most misdemeanor and nonviolent felony cases without using any kind of risk assessment tool. Bill, I know that the idea of bail has been deeply rooted in the American experience, and it is the idea that if you make a guy put up some money or go to a bail bondsman and borrow some money, essentially, that the risk of that loss will motivate him to show up in court when he's expected to. Do you think that that system set in place so long ago is still the only way to handle this? Do you have any better ideas, or do you think that that was genius?
Well, I wouldn't say it's genius, and I don't know that I have any better ideas. I haven't thought about it long. But I will say that there's a part of the equation missing that you're not talking about. Most people, responsible or otherwise, will go to, well, let's take two cases. You've got, and let's just assume that both cases are guilty. You've got somebody responsible, somebody with something to lose and so on, and they set bail and they show up at trial. They were going to show up at trial anyway, or they were certainly thinking about it. And the bail money is what convinces them to go ahead and get back into the legal system and go ahead with the process. But we're not really interested in those people. What we're interested in is in career criminals. And the part of the equation that you've left out is the idea that if a bail bond company has somebody skip out on bail, they have the legal authority to send somebody out and grab that person. And that person's not limited by the restrictions that are placed on law enforcement. So the idea of a bounty hunter, which I don't think is used very often, but certainly the existence of them is important, makes it clear to anybody who's nefarious, who decides that they want to skip out on bail. It's not like, ha, 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 you're left holding the money. Somebody's coming after you now. And that aspect of it, I think, has a very strong sort of a coercive effect to get people back.
Well, it's
to
also
their
a
court
big
dates.
business, Bill, which is why the Bail Bondsmen Association, I forget what the formal name of the group of businesses is, but they've spent millions of dollars fighting this Proposition 25 because they don't want to see going away from the cash bail business. It's a lucrative business to be in. But the question really becomes, is it fair to treat people that way? Because in reality, what really happens is poor and largely black people who are accused of crimes will actually actually sit in jail because they can't afford the bail or they can't go to the bondsman. And as a result of that, they're away from their families. They often lose their jobs. Even if they wind up not being convicted of the crime that they were initially detained for, their life has been ruined for them, and that follows them around for the rest of their lives. So wouldn't it be better if we had a system that would treat people who are wealthy the same as it treats people who are poor?
Well, to some degree we do, right? I mean, when a judge sets bail for a defendant, he sets bail not according to the crime, but according to what he estimates will be enough to bring the defendant back to court, right?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay, so I agree the system's not perfect, and I'm not saying it can't be improved, but there is a measure in there already to deal with the fact that a judge will set bail proportionately based on what that person's perceived ability to pay it is. The entire idea of bail is that the amount of money has to be large enough to compel you to come back to the courtroom. And if you set a uniform bail and not a bail just like flat bail, let's say you set a flat bail that would be fair and easily reachable by a person who's quite poor. A rich person would look at that and just scoff. They just laugh. They're gone. So there is a lot of flexibility in the system, and it's worked relatively well so far. And another factor that's actually, I think, probably the most important one, Scott, is that you usually have to borrow bail money from people you love. Usually it's only going to be the people you love and the people you care about that are going to provide the bail for you in the first place if you can't set it yourself. And that moral obligation to your mother, let's say, or your brother, your best friend, or whatever, is also a big factor in getting people to come back to court. And that's the entire purpose of bail, and that's what we're trying to maintain. Again, I come back to my first reaction to this, which is that I believe that this is an attempt to eliminate bail completely and eliminate the requirement to come back to court completely. What it basically is doing in a state that is so pro-criminal that it not only allows businesses to be burned by the ground, but actually encourages it, holds the police back. During the George Floyd riots, I saw in LA a number of policemen, 12 or 13, outside of a building. The looters found out that the police were outside. They came running out one by one, and they literally pushed the policemen out of the way as they ran away to freedom, because the police were not allowed to arrest them. So when you have a state government like that, it's not lunacy to assume that the purpose of this is to basically say, well, if you're gonna get this guy, you're gonna have to catch him twice. First, you're gonna have to arrest him for the crime he committed, and then we're gonna essentially eliminate the entire idea of bail. So he's gonna skip bail or skip what used to be bail. Now you got to go get him again. You can't function in a society that is upside down morally and logically. It just can't. And so I am sympathetic, certainly, to any solution that might be more equitable, any solution that might remove racial prejudice, or whatever the case may be. But I would not put this on the list of the top 10 problems in the country, and I wouldn't put it on the list of the top 20 either.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful that you watched this episode. We're even more grateful to the people who paid for it. Those are the members of BillWhittle.com who contribute as little as $10 a month to make sure that these ideas get spread around the world. And you have now become part of that idea virus, so to speak. Why don't you become part of the organization that actually funds it by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.